Hi, how's it going? This is Resident of Collinwood for YouTube. Sorry I didn't get any uploading yesterday. I was not feeling well. But today I'm feeling okay, so I'm here to continue my read along of the Dark Shadows Daybook UnBound, episode 481. By the way, this is chapter 3. Episode 481. Sorry about that. After being caught snooping in the garden, Angelique has no choice but to steal Dr. Lane's secret anti-witch medallion. But first, she'll need a good lawyer to hypnotize. Tony Peterson, Jerry Lacey. As Julia nearly calls the cops on Barnabas and Lane, she is reminded of Dave Woodard's murder. Later, she and Barnabas fence over Lane's plan, keeping the threat of Angelique in focus, which is easy because he catches her snooping on them. Later, she notices that Tony Peterson looks like Reverend Trask and relishes the irony of making him her slave to fetch Lane's secret anti-witch medallion. Lane is duped into leaving his home, and when he realizes the deception, rushes back. Reliable histrionics rule the day as Grayson Hall explores a completely understandable meltdown for Julia as she tries to decide whether to drop a dime on Barnabas for perhaps the last time. But not to be outdone, Addison Powell is again topping everyone. Combined as he reels with the news of missing medallions and dummy requests to render medical aid, Addison Powell was a serious actor, and yet I have to wonder if anyone on the show asked him to tone it down, because he's singularly athletic acting approach, making Keith Prentice sound like Ricky Jay at his most Atlantic school wouldn't. I think Powell would have just said the part said mad scientist, so I'm playing a mad scientist. What else am I supposed to play? Demused resignation. By the way, once we go off the air in the afternoon, our prime demographics' biggest concerns are cooties, geometry tests, and meatloaf. Amazingly, Addison Powell plays a character who seems to know he's trapped on a soap opera named Dark Shadows, and has adopted a defensively broad acting style to dupe producers into thinking he's not in on it. He just needs to pull out the aces when the time is right. In short, Roger Davis is about to get his face ripped off, and Julia decides to call the cops, even though Barnabas needs the face. And when life wasn't so easy, and then life wasn't so easy. Dark Shadows is a frustrating show by design because it's reliably realistic in the way that matters. Like life, we know how it's supposed to go. And unlike life, we know where it's going. Julia and Barnabas are friends, and once the show comes back from 1795, it's a different show. And they're pals very fast, right? Because that's the good part, and we like the good part, right? The tone above gives the answer, of course. It's not that easy. From the most microscopic perspective, this is true because we need it to be. It tells us that we are not alone in our frustration. With progress toward the inevitable, life should not be 2 steps forward, 3 steps back, but it is. It's what makes Dark Shadows frustratingly slow, infinitely watchable, and the most identifiable on TV. Actors like Jonathan Frid and Grayson Hall excel at navigation. This peculiar external angst. As the episode begins, Julia contemplates what would have once been no dilemma at all. Face stealing is a crime, after all. Now, she's so far down the rabbit hole, it's an option to be debated with her soon to be best friend, Barnabas. Together, they are the Oliver and Lisa to Collinsport's Hooterville, but as Lang might do in an experiment reversed to genders, Grayson is Oliver, trying to impose the last whips of order on a maelstrom of weirdness. The more they try, the more they fail. Barnabas learned long, long ago to just go with it. Yes, Barnabas is our Eva Garber, but I don't need to tell you that. At the same time, Barnabas Collins is the man that Angelique made him. He is a paragon in some sense. He's also a hero who kills in cold blood and then sucks it dry as a warning to anyone who might dream of crossing him. He's a benevolent gentleman, and he's also the most brutal, sadistic, and vindictive dweller of the night to stalk the small screen. That Angelique should warm to Jerry Lacey's vaguely bewildered Tony Peterson is obvious. It's not that she has the opportunity to romance a great witch hunter. No, she finally unites with the man who joined in to inaugurate the undead living nightmare that binds him nearly 2 centuries later. When Barnabas grabs her and scolds her in front of Julia like the sitcom Snoop, she's become the disdained Bond of Trask, and Bouchard's is upgrade to inevitable. Why Barnabas? I mean, I know literally why, but Dark Shadows is an engine of celebration, of punishments that exceed their crimes by infinite degrees. So why Barnabas? Why any of us? One of the reasons that Dark Shadows speaks to us is that it features characters trapped in a dishonorable world that nonetheless triumphs honorable standards regardless of those trapped in the chasm of the disparity. Depending on the storyline, Liz, Victoria, Maggie, and even Neo Rogers sit with heads high and noses higher as everyone else fights backstairs battles quietly enough to not disturb the sherry break. Taking it into the hall or parallel time if necessary. Barnabas is the ultimate victim of circumstance, as are we all. But poor Tony Peterson may take the urinal cake of cosmic suffering in this one as we kick off what would go on to become the most artistically successful spin-off of the Dark Shadows universe. And that's the perverse chemistry of Laura Parker's evolvingly impish Angelique with the long-suffering everyman Jerry Lacey's Tony Peterson, the man with Trask's face. As a team-up in the finest of the Big Finish productions from the pen of the masterful Mark Passmore, it's the least likely pair on the show, but with the two most unpredictable and autonomous characters in the ensemble. Taking things beyond Bewitched and perhaps even beyond Westworld, Peterson handily inherits the throne of calling shenanigans from Harry Johnson's fugitive father, Bill Malloy. But unlike Malloy, he hasn't the luck of being thrown off a cliff by Matthew Morgan. Stuck with someone, Angelique, whose kindness comes only when it's convenient, we have the one sap in Collinsport incapable of doing much wrong. He and Barnabas are strange brothers orbiting around Angelique, vaguely trying to do something right and receiving the proportionate punishment for it. But don't we all? And by seeing it on Dark Shadows, that strange spook house progeny of James Whale and W.C. Fields, we can just barely survive it. This episode hit the airwaves April 29th, 1968. Episode 482. When Lane is in search of a new assistant with nerves of steel, Barnabas can think of only one man. Loomis, Willie Loomis. Barnabas, Jonathan Frid. Barnabas suggests Willie to Lane as his new assistant after Jeff Clark quits. Jeff is compelled to appear at Maggie's and her the dream. That night he has it. Barnabas Collins reveals himself to be a master of the game as he delivers the greatest blow possible to Eric Lane. When the greatest scientific mind in the Western world, abandoned by Roger Davis, needs an assistant for the most important experiment in human history, Barnabas knows just the man. The assistant needs only good hands and a lot of nerve. Who's up? Joe Haskell, Buzz Hackett, Ross the Skipper? No, my friends. For such a mission, there is only one man. Who better than cravenly, hysterical, alcoholic, multiple bullet wound survivor, and PTSD poster boy, William H. Loomis, Esquire. Yeah. Late of Wincliffe Sanitarium. This, to me, is proof positive that Barnabas has no real interest in a cure. Yes, Roger Davis, who now has friends in Collinsport, and good for him, is an impossible act to follow. But is Willie the preferred weapon here? The best part is that Lane hears that the lad is in a mental institution and has absolutely no qualms about using him. It just goes to show what you can accomplish when you have the lowest or most conventionally expended standards possible. With this one decision, and perhaps it's a test by Barnabas, they both fail. In doing so, Lane reveals himself to be the Hal Needleham of mad science, completely daring and utterly artless. And that's why he gets things done. If only Mike Henry had played Adam. Then Maggie answers the door in an oven mitt. It may be the single most ghastly costume piece ever, forced on a performer on Dark Shadows. When a skirt made from the Collinsport Afghan is too muted and tasteful, look to Orbox, my friend. And when people want to know what women wore in the era, they can look to certain scenes on Dark Shadows. This is a garment so eye-popping that no one would have kept it. No one would revive it. No costume designer would try putting a star in it for some period piece. It is a skirt lost to history. But no agendas exited then except to sell stuff from Orabox. And thus the show again serves a new purpose, that of time capsule. Like David Collins' major Matt Mason toys, Dark Shadows is an accidental portrait of so much that would otherwise be lost to newer and better. And what else are you supposed to wear for Roger Davis to appear at your front door and ask you about your dreams? The Dream Curse is truly up and running now, as we have our first viral transmission of it. And as we understand what the shtick is going to be for the next few weeks, it both builds and consistently backfires at the show's effects reach. As the show's effects reach. Finally exceeding its practical and budgetary grasp, this is a problematic error for the show. At once a pure example of it, and the first major storyline that gets vague derision from certain fans. Still, it serves an interesting set of purposes. Psychologically first, of course, it's a basic workbox test to reveal the characters. Although we know them intimately, the program was gaining new audiences by the thousands each week, and the Dream Curse cleverly catches them up with the core roster, including their most revealing fears. It's also the first example of the show letting itself down in almost every aspect of the technical execution of something. This is important to fans because it forces you to make a choice. Accept them for what they are or defect. Once you agree to go with it, you agree to accept that the special effects on the program are symbolic. And after that compact is made, the show is no longer bound by any attempt to render the fantastic credibly. Only then can you truly cut loose with thinking that suggests, hey, they accepted the Dream Curse, why not take them to hell? Dark Shadows could only do the impossible because all weapon here, all page did not jump there. All effects were probably going to fall short. Not that they'd aim for that, but when that is the result, anything is possible. In this sense, the Dream Curse is more a blessing than something less. This episode hit the airwaves April 30th, 1968. I love the Dream Curse. It's a great plot in Dark Shadows. I'm not certain, but I think this is the longest daybook that I've written. I write by dictation, and I was in a particularly chatty mood that morning. The beginning of May holds an understandable sorcery for anyone on any end of the education industry. Naturally, I'm going to be an ebullient mood, even if it makes me collect a bunch of tangents together and call it an essay. Episode 485. Barnabas knows the ultimate happiness is right around the corner because his best friend do all that they can to talk him out of it. Eric Lang, Addison Powell. Lang relates the Dream Curse to Julia on the eve of the experiment as she tries to talk him out of it. Meanwhile, Barnabas relates his instructions to Willie on the eve of the experiment as he tries to talk him out of it. Across Collinsport, Angelique, tired of the moralization, stabs a voodoo doll of Lang, and then probably takes a long, well deserved bubble bath. One of the great things about Ghostbusters is its use of science to address the supernatural. It would be convenient to say that this is something that started with the novel Frankenstein, except that the process only hinted at it in the book is as much alchemical, alchemical as it was laboratory grade. In exploring the dichotomy between the two methods of describing and controlling the universe, Dark Shadows generally comes down on the side of the supernatural, except when it doesn't. And it doesn't with a surprising regularity. Science makes more appearance than you would think. Peter Guthrie is no witch doctor. Julia begins the show by literally seeing the supernatural through a microscope. The heroes of 1795 at least assert a preference for scientific thinking. And if scientific thinking is not always the answer, it certainly has a seat at the seance table. Julia works with Angelique to combine biochemistry and black magic to help Barnabas in 1897. The entire existence of parallel time is well founded in vaguely articulated pseudoscientific mumbo jumbo recited by Stokes. With incredibly precious ambiguity, science along with Cyrus Longworth, and a side trip to 1840 via a chronoportion staircase, well founded in time honored principles of total scientific illiteracy. However, Dark Shadows is under no obligation to be scientifically literate. It doesn't have to worry about Isaac Asimov clutching his pearly mutton chops as he watches it, kvetching that it's no space 1999. For Dark Shadows, science may simply be magic in lab coats. But that's not all. It's the Renaissance. It's often the sole force that man has against the new world of ancient gods and monsters. Although it is carefully protected from resembling reality, it still exists to troll haughty-toddy magic users and level the playing field for the rest of us. And of course, it must be mad science, because regular science is too boring and largely exists to give everyone reasons why they can't have any fun. Eric Lang is my kind of scientist. Just imagine him mixing it up with Rand Paul instead of Anthony Fauci. I'm sure somehow COVID would have been cured by now. Adamantly, we would all have giraffe heads grafted onto us, which would have absolutely nothing to do with curing COVID. But I have every confidence that Eric Lang was also on the board of the Collinsport Community Playhouse and was itching to do a modified version of some Ionesco, a playwright he admired for his gritty, hard-hitting realism. After that controversial all-nude production of Darling of the Day, he had to play it safe. Every year for a fundraiser, they would do a haunted house, which was actually the only month out of the year that Lang would simply take down the scam, schematics covering everything in his home and show off his work in all its glory. All seriousness aside, the episode crackles with more pure fun than a Chick-fil-A hijacked by RuPaul and Steve Shives. Open for biz and spiking the lemonade with bourbon on a Sunday near you. It begins with Lang trying to logic his way through the dream curse, knowing that well by saying goodbye to Dark Shadow's most passionate showman, Addison Powell. It's a glorious monologue that hovers somewhere between sobriety and appropriate sentimentalism. As these people share nightmares, it's the closet it's the closest the program comes to pres- presenting the characters displaying their own individual horror TV series. It's as if they themselves are producing a meta Dark Shadows. Lang tries to persuade Julia that there's nothing inordinately dangerous to injecting the soul of Barnabas into the body of Adam. You know, now that all of the heads have been swayed off, reattached, sawed off, reattached, and Roger Davis still has his face, hearing this, Julia has her doubts and says that she might prefer if Barnabas simply went back to being a vampire. Yeah, you heard me. Julia eventually emerges uh, as the voice of conscience and common sense for Barnabas. You know, over a year from now, but today, she has one black stockinged leg in the bold future of 1897 and another one still in the lab trying to chemically shrivel Barnabas into a future Dawn Post bestseller. Like in the episode of Next Generation where they kept aging Dr. Pulaski by taking off layer upon layer of Diana Mulder's makeup. I kid, better than Crusher sees me. But I have to question the morale compass of anyone who would put the inevitable of the serial killing lord of the undead of a serial killing lord of the undead. Sorry, capable of spreading a vampiric pathogen that could decimate the human race if well shaded and unchecked, above a wacky experiment that will probably just end in nothing but a crackle, a burning scent, some shrugs, and then Lang, Julia and Willie splitting the contents of Barnabas's wallet 3 ways at TGI's Fridays, which knowing what a cheap SOB he was, will barely cover the cost of the 7-layer dip and that ultimate margarita. That is how Julia spells relief on any day ending in Y. Why indeed? Shifting to the old house, it's immediately clear that Barnabas is trying to solve his ongoing external crisis because there's Willie at his side, wringing his hands and doing everything possible to discourage him from seeking happiness. Moments like these make Margaret Hamilton's Cora from those Maxwell House ads looked like a free-wheeling Dennis Hopper. Willie must have nothing to do because he just watched Julia in the previous scene and is basically repeating what she said to Lane. His namby-pamby nagging and cheek give Jonathan Frid one of his greatest and most genuine line readings. And it's the kind of moment going by in a flash it makes the program absolute gold. All the vampire and curse stuff is interesting. If you like that sort of thing, but it's not nearly as much fun as watching this old married couple go at it for the umpteenth time, Loomis flatly states, I don't like it. Barnabas responds with the withering cattiness worthy of Count Petofe. He opines that is a shame, sighs, and desperately tries to secure his fortune by writing a questionable letter instructing the family to hand over all of his possessions and the old house to a cousin from England. Yeah, they'd ever do that, sorry. But Willie continues his campaign of simpering instead of doing what he should, which is quickly finishing a paint-by-numbers portrait of Robert Rodin in Georgian drag to sneak onto the wall of the drawing room, as if it were yet another portrait of an ancestor that had been there the whole time. You know, the minimum limit Loomis test that Roger and Liz need to fork over priceless real estate to a fancy lad stranger. Hey, if it worked for Georges Baker and Lisenby, why not here? Just for a moment, I want you to picture that version of the show. Picture a Dark Shadows where the experiment worked and Jonathan Frid must loop in the dialogue for Robert Rodin as if he just emerged from Boris Blankenkoff's mind transplant device for the rest of the series. It's a pretty good show, come to think of it, calling it Robot Loomis. But all this fear over the experiment and a preference for Barnabas to be a vampire again has a disturbing subtext. People in abusive relationships tend to gravitate back to further abusers because a familiar love is preferable to taking a chance on a happy future. Although it's unexpected, that is a truth reflected here by both Willie and Julia. However, Barnabas is willing to literally change his mind. So that's next in line. Barnabas, the experiment still free, Lang must have reminded him before adding, take a chance on me. Yes, I once directed Mamma Mia, or as I called it, a cry for help, and those lambs are still decidedly screaming, Clarice. Barnabas is so ready for the process that he even puts on a blue bathrobe for the experiment, like Red Sonja in that armor that I'm sure is just protective. I assume it's for freedom of movement, but I still feel like the old boy is being exploited. Actually, after seeing him manfully clad in suits, capes, jabots, ascots, tights, and various kerchiefs for a year, the symbolic impact of the blue bathrobe conveys the incredibly human vulnerability of Barnabas in a way that is unparalleled across the series. Either that, or he's waiting for a Gene Shepard narration to start describing his long-standing battle with Lang's idiosyncratic furnace as Julia once again unsuccessfully attempts to get Willie to eat meatloaf. Well, there are no bumpus hounds to devour the turkey of progress as Lane charges up a zone of electric sex to begin the transfer. But don't think the supernatural will go down without a fight. As Lane starts to science, Willie goes to Collinwood in an act of cosmic inevitability for the next few months of the show to happen. It's vital that Willie hand Angelique the one document she desperately needs, the letter about Adam Collins. And it's just in time for her to get out of her trusty Eric Lane Mego voodoo doll and sling the silver sentinel of science's sober sojourn of scientific study into total chaos. And for a moment, an important moment, all of the wackiness stops. We see Barnabas, our friend and hero, screaming in a degree of pain that is suddenly and uncomfortably real. We've seen him worry, we've seen him fret, but television usually stops short of showing a character destined to live. Experiencing a pointless and sadistic agony, and Lane is experiencing it as well. Maybe we should say it's tantamount to the pain of childbirth, which is what the scene is about. But this is not such pain. This is sadism, and it is sadism from a witch, a creature of darkness, a creature of anti-science, someone whose existence knows only the continuum from literal hellfire to the blazing execution stake that represents human justice. How dare he be cured? More pointedly, how dare he be cured by someone other than she? In that attack, we get a full spectrum view of a quintessential struggle for human identity. No, really, male versus female, science versus religion, reason versus emotion, fear versus informed optimism. What is at stake? Literally the human mind, and if it exists, the soul. No answers except that one side seeks to use nature to control nature. One side wishes to punish the attempts to steal what was her fire. Exclusively science will, as we will learn, win the day, but not without sacrifices. Adam will live, as will Barnabas, and no matter how big Angelique's Twinkie is, for one day at least, Eric Lane, Barnabas Collins, and Julia Hoffman had the guts to cross the streams. This episode hit the airways May 3rd, 1968. Episode 490. On the eve of Adam's creation, will the dream curse give Julia an ugly wake-up? Barnabas, Jonathan Fritt. Julia reels from the dream, and Barnabas fears what should happen if she shares it with Mrs. Johnson. Of course, Mrs. Johnson shows up somewhat in a daze and claiming to have no dreams whatsoever. Julia is relieved after sharing the dream, and at the same time, Barnabas reassures Victoria that if she likes him, she'll love his cousin Adam. What a coincidence that they won't be around at the same time. Meanwhile, the attempt to bring Adam to life goes somewhat haywire, resulting in both Barnabas and Adam being alive at the same time. I often wonder if Dan Curtis found himself in a position analogous to Barnabas and Julia around this time. Do any of the three of them know the nature of the pickle they're in? The challenge facing all three is, once we've created the lug, then what? He's going to struggle and shamble and even eventually go away after several months of unresolved tension. That is, if it follows the model of the novel, which is the whole thing does kind of. This is the first case we're following the liter- literal model limits rather than liberties. The writing staff, however, in 490, they're on the principle or principle or sorry precipitous, and all things are still possible. In fact, they skirt around a much more interesting storyline on the way. And things are more memorably wacky before that. 2. In the cosmic meanwhile, it's so nice to see the show settle into the perverse domestic comedy of life with Barnabas and Julia. It's even nicer to see the temporary role reverse of Barnabas hectoring Julia into action, nudging the doctor to work harder and faster. Clad in a robe for the climax, Jonathan Frid might as well be wearing a mask of cold cream and have his hair in curls while he's at it. With the atom experiment doomed to the failure of mixed baggery, it's in an episode of tense optimism surrounded by fatalism. Sleep gives no relief. The dream curse is now upon Julia. And that puts it one step closer to Barnabas. To what does she wake up? A plan so insane that no one would have anything to do with it unless it sat at the end of the year of compromise and terrible. Seemed like a good idea at the time. Decisions. Doomed when waking, doomed when sleeping. The option of just stopping and living with the ugly life of a vampire doesn't occur to them. Amid this festival of fatalism, beginning with the dream curse and ending with the horrifying realization that both Adam and Barnabas are still alive, the show gives us one critical reminder of why they're doing it at all. It's not a matter of escaping from Angelique. It's escaping to Victoria. And doing this through the writers set themselves up for a trap. The storyline that would have been triggered had the Adam plan been successful is far more interesting than what we get. And it can be sensed even if this is your first time with the show. Imagine Barnabas showing back up in another body, arguably a more powerful one, to Victoria, a more attractive one. It's a new dawn and one that thoroughly confuses Angelique. Maybe Jonathan Frid gets a vacation. Maybe he lives but is reserved to the man he was before the experiment. So there are two Barnaby. I just know that the prospect of Barnabas as reinsulation himself into Collinwood, reintroducing himself, or reinstantation himself into Collinwood as someone else is an intriguing potential that almost becomes realized. Maybe that's what would happen if they were to do it today. But it's vital to remember that all of these sins were first for television, or almost first. Moving on to Frankenstein is a logical step for the show, since in our collective imaginations, that legend follows Dracula as if it were all part of the same world. The show borrows from Dracula only in the sense that both stories involve people who bit others and drank their blood. There might have been greater versatility in the storyline if they had played as fast and loose with Frankenstein. The potential of a man who doesn't exist, inhabited by the soul of a man who perhaps should not exist, is the real kernel of the drama. The writers were wise to pursue that early on. The story's potential for continuing it is one of the greatest unrealized possibilities of the overall storyline. Yes, they revisit it with interesting results during parallel time, but the spark of It's Alive is a fleeting one. This episode hit the airways May 10th, 1968. Here's a neat trick for analyzing the Dark Shadows episodes. Look for installments that ping pong or progress between the thoughts and actions of two couples. Dark Shadows episodes traditionally had about 5 performers per, and many of the best. Each pair of characters has a scene or two that are juxtaposed with another pair of characters. And the sort of mental exercise that you thought you would never do again after high school, step back and compare the two duos. Even if the writers never intended for them to reflect each other, it's a natural result. If the creative process, however, I feel that these juxtapositions often happen on purpose, and they do wonders for the dramatic flow of the program. All right, guys, I'm going to stop for right there, and I'm going to continue here after a bit. I'm going to begin episode 495 when I come back. I'll see you guys here after a bit. Link to where you can get the Dark Shadows Daybook UnBound is in the description box. Guys, this is only 99 cents. I got this on my Kindle, so this is really, really, really good. I'm enjoying it very, very much. It's very deep. The essays are very, very deep. I love the Dream Curse and Adam Ark. I think they're very complementary to each other. I might do a video about that tonight, actually. Well, actually, I got an interview tonight, but maybe I'll do that later on, or do the Adam video later on. But I really think the Adam arc and the Dream Curse arc are really, really well done. So I'll see you guys later tonight. Link to where you can get the Dark Shadows Daybook UnBound will be in the description box. Go pick this up, guys. It is really, really good.